Hello everyone, my name is Boulevard, and welcome to Tournament Tactician. Not going to be really doing a tier list today. Instead, because we just had our first Eternal Open and we're going into the second one, I really just want to talk to you about what came out of the first Eternal Open, what to expect, what we learned from this event, and how to adapt going into the next one. So, kick things off, Jax, Ornn, Plaza Guardian, Aphelios, Victor. While compiling the stats for each region, I noticed that far and away, this was just like the most popular lineup. There are quite a few players that are on this combination of decks, and the fact that it was won by Mr. Bear in the APAC region, like, really kind of set the tone for the weekend of, like, hey, this is the safe lineup. And I'm not really sure if this, like, is what compelled EMEA in the Americas to be so big on this lineup, because we don't have stats for Swiss. I can't really tell you how many people were on this, but I will say that it really set the tone, and, like, I noticed that EMEA AM had a lot of this lineup, and I'm really curious if, like, that was because Mr. Bear won with it, or if we were already on that train of thinking. And the answer to that is important to understand if this is still going to be the lineup going into this open. For now, I'm kind of operating the assumption that it is, and I'll talk about how to handle that later. Then we look at second place with JO1, and we've got, like, mostly aggro, and then Jax Ornn. Then we kind of get into the Wild West, right? It's a little weird to see, like, Pirates and Ionia Field Rush in the same lineup. We've got Udyr Galio and Vayne Aatrox in this lineup. But the main thing to take away here is that, like, this lineup is very safe, and Plaza Guardian is very broken. Everybody should be playing this. I don't think you should be looking to beat this, because it has not been working out for players. EMEA, though, triple timelines wins the event, which is kind of weird because, like, there's only 5 timelines in the entirety of the top 64, so obviously, like, here's 3 of them. And then when we look at EMEA, they're sort of the biggest outlier region, because when we look at the top 8, we see 0 aggro decks, right? There's no Pirates, there's no Annie Jhin, there's no Ziggs Poppy, nothing like that. There's one Samira Draven Scion Rumble pile, and that's, like, the closest thing that you actually get to aggro in, like, elusives, right? Like, and they're not even in the same lineup. So EMEA is very much an outlier here. Luckily, again, we get that safe XYZ lineup to take second place, kind of reel us back into reality. And one thing I want to point out here is, like, Condensed Shelly and Teemo Tristana, these are, like, top 5 decks in EMEA, completely absent from the top cut of APAC. So this was, like, the EMEA spin on things. And I am kind of curious on, like, where Condensed Shelly kind of falls into things, but there's really not a lot of stats on it, so unfortunately I'm going to have to leave that one to you to figure out. But Teemo Tristana comes in as kind of like one of the biggest baits of the weekend, where you've got one of them in top 16. That's as far as this deck made it. Then, like, 3 more fell out in top 32, and then the rest of them lost in top 64. And then, again, there were 0 in APAC. There were only 2 in the Americas. So, like, EMEA was kind of huffing on this one. Is what it is. Then when we look at the Americas, we get into the lineup that I was talking about, where, like, I was very big on Rise. I was very big on Plaza Guardian. I hadn't quite found the third deck for the lineup, and, you know, Taigai came in with Karmaset Shadow Isle, which I think is a fine choice. I think we can do a little bit better. Like, I think this is the deck that gets tweaked, if any of them, but I know this was, like, a big comfort pick for Taigai. And then when we look... Oh, I hate it when formulas do that. And then when we look at second place, you know, we finally see aggro doing something. It's so wild to me that we, like, watched aggro kind of get, like, you know, do okay in APAC, in that, like, there was almost an aggro lineup in second place, and then, like, a couple, like, there's an aggro lineup here, a couple of aggro decks kind of sparingly, but, like, as far as aggro lineups, there's, like, 1 in top 8, and that's kind of it. I'm highlighting the wrong one. And then when we get to the Americas, we fucking slam our foot on the gas on Pirates. It was so fucking brave of the Americas to watch aggro get dumpstered in the other 2 regions, and then say, yeah, fuck it, full send it. Not very surprising it didn't work out. And you can talk all you want about, like, oh, Cup misplayed the finals, and, like, Cup will be the first one to tell you they kind of played like shit. But because it was a 2-0, we don't really know how that third game would have went, so I'm not really buying into those arguments, so to speak. But we had more aggro in top 8 as well. Like, Bitter ran a triple aggro lineup, Flock ran a triple aggro lineup, and one thing that I want to point out that I think is, like, very important to take note of is that Taigai is the one that knocked Flock out of top 8, and it was once again a 2-0. I believe it was a 2-0 on Pirates as well. So, like, against Flock and against Cup, Taigai 4-0s Pirates. So you can look at this lineup, and you can say, oh, that loses to aggro. But the fact of the matter is, Taigai beat Flock and Cup on triple aggro. Just want to throw that one out there. That said, again, it was a 4-0 on Pirates. So maybe Pirates is the weak link of the lineup. If you are looking to play aggro, then not only would I recommend getting away from Pirates, because it is the one that everybody was obviously expecting being the number 3 deck, but it was apparently the weak link of the lineup for Flock and Cup. Maybe Cup got to play Scion. I don't actually remember. I thought it was a 2-0 on Pirates, but, you know, again, I don't really remember. It might not have even been a 2-0. I was pretty sure it was a 2-0, though. It's really not that important. But then we take a look at, like, you know, just aggro as a whole. The fact that it couldn't beat this lineup. The fact that what makes the standard lineup so good is, like, how much game it has into aggro, where Plaza Guardian should be the weak link, but it's just kind of not, as players have proven over and over again. Jax Ornn has a lot of healing. And I do want to mention that, like, last week, like, doing Tournament Tactician, I really didn't touch on Jax Ornn at all, and that's because I thought Timelines was going to be doing better still. I thought people weren't going to drop the deck as hard as they did, and Trundle Ornn Timelines, I think, is actually very comparable to Jax Ornn, but Jax Ornn has more healing and obviously, like, more consistency because you're not revolving around drawing Timelines, but a little bit less explosive power. And this does change the matchup charts considerably. But one of the big things that, like, Jax Ornn is getting over Timelines is, one, the ability to play on turns 1 and 2, which helps the aggro matchups immensely, but also the fact that Innovative Blacksmith is actually going to stay on field to get you some of that healing turn after turn. So when we look at the APAC win, it's just kind of reinforcing that, like, this is the standard lineup, and it beats aggro. You shouldn't run aggro. EMEA, I really don't know how to read a triple Timelines win over the, especially with only 5 Timelines in Top Cut. Like, it's so weird. So like, it's just so hard to evaluate. I really don't have time this week to, like, get into it. And then when we look at the Americas, the fact that, like, this is what aggro probably should have been beating and still didn't, you know, I think really solidifies that, like, you probably, like, aggro is not really a safe bet. Now, in EMEA, aggro might have been a safer bet, and it is kind of funny that, like, they're the ones that were really down on it, like, only 5 pirates for them. APAC, I don't think, actually, yeah, so EMEA was the region with the least pirates, and then the one where triple Timelines won. I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence, but it's not super important. The point is that I think aggro is not a safe bet, especially into the open rounds. If people do continue to hang on to this as the standard lineup, like, this is the safe XYZ that you take to get you through the open rounds. And then for Top Cut is when you switch to something like Taigai's lineup and you try to out-late game people while still beating aggro. And I am a little concerned that there's going to be this huge push for people trying to out-late game each other and then just losing to aggro. So we've really got to thread the needle on this one here. And I think, like, Taigai had a pretty good line for that with his Rise deck, like the double Tasty Fey Folk, the triple Eye of the Dragon, whilst the double Stream and Telstones also worked phenomenally. The amount of times that I watched this man blow out a Pirates player with the Spirit Fire was, I believe, more than one. I think it was twice, but doesn't really matter. Point is, I think that, like, Taigai's builds are pretty net deckable. I don't think you necessarily want to be going, like, much later than this and abandoning your aggro matchups. The box, yeah, maybe you don't play the box if you are expecting, like, you know, a bunch of Rise and Karma Set and things like that, because no one's really throwing down Karma until she's got 4 HP anyway. But, yeah, that's neither here nor there. What I want to talk about now is, knowing all of this, like, what's going to change going into this weekend. Now, one thing I also want to point out, just so that you have this information, is, like, I've compiled the global top 8 here and ran the stats on it. Really not a lot of Aphelios Victor actually breaking into top 8s. It's like, you know, the one that got first place, the one that got second place, and then there really wasn't a whole lot aside from that. Another thing I want to point out, I mentioned this earlier, Condensed Shelly only in Europe's top 8, and Conservatory, the reason it's red over here instead of here is because there were no Conservatory in the top 8 of the Americas. And those are sort of the big outliers. It's like, EMEA is all of the Condensed Shelly, Americas is none of the Conservatory. Okay, we also had most of the aggro. Then there's, like, these weird Vayne Freljord decks that I'm kind of curious about, where, like, there was like 4 Vayne Jarvan Freljord in the top cut of the Americas, and I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I don't really know how to read that one. But if this is what the top end of the meta is looking like, do you think mid-range is the way to beat that? Because I unfortunately am not so convinced. I think Black Boss's lineup is what people kind of want to be looking at, is like, yeah, you know, this is where we start, you know, this is how you beat these decks. If you're looking at Plaza Guardian, Rise, Karma Set, then, like, yeah, maybe I want to be going for this double or even triple Stony Suppressor lineup. Unfortunately, let me check my VODs here, because if I am correct... Nope. Okay. I couldn't remember when I watched... I I know I watched Black Boss at some point, and I know that I watched Taigai in top 16. I was trying to remember if Taigai was the one that beat Black Boss, because that would have been absolutely wild if, like, you know, you're coming in with these Stony Suppressor decks and you're losing to this still. But I think that is more of the direction that you want to be going than aggro, but I don't necessarily know that that's even, like, a safe bet. And that's kind of the issue, right? Is, like, we really hoped that with having an open already happen, we'd have a very safe idea of what to play in the second open, and that is just not the case. My recommendation, I believe, is still going to be a variation of this lineup, the XYZ for the open rounds, and then a variation of this lineup for Top Cut, is what I would be doing this weekend at the very least. And I was very big on Aphelios Victor, and it's sort of shown up as like the weak link of this lineup, just because in the head-to-head, you're banning Plaza Guardian, and then Aphelios Victor is losing to Jax Orin. Now, obviously, the power of Aphelios Victor is how flexible it is. You can run this deck a lot of different ways, but for the most part, making it out late game control, like making it out late game something like this, is going to be a bit of a pickle, bit of an uphill battle. It's probably better to just drop it for something else. So as far as a variation of this lineup, you know, going into the open rounds this weekend, if you're trying to beat aggro, this is still a completely fine lineup. There's like a lot of healing, a lot of board presence. If you want to win the head-to-head, though, then the decks that are beating Aphelios Victor are these. And the decks that are beating Jax Ornn, because again, we're still banning the Plaza Guardian deck, are these. And I do want to point out that Ionia Feel the Rush also was beating Aphelios Victor, but it was like a 51% win rate. You know, it wasn't really anything worth mentioning. And the fact that Jax Ornn is losing to Rise and Norris Wayne and, you know, Io Feel the Rush is like it's kind of scary, right? Especially when we look at, like, you know, what we want to do for Top Cut and like Rise and Plaza Guardian and another deck. So Io Feel the Rush, I do want to point out, I do not think you can do. I don't think that's the answer, primarily because I was looking at the stats and I was like, I'm pretty sure Ionia Feel the Rush like gets bodied by aggro, and ignoring all, like, even with all of these stats present, people are still going to run triple aggro. They're going to look at Cup's performance. They're going to say, okay, Cup misplayed the finals, so I'll just run this back, and I could beat lineups like this, and, you know, I topped with aggro last time or what have you. And Io Feel the Rush gets absolutely bodied by aggro, like you kind of expected it to. And I mean, like, hard bodied. I'm talking like 20% win rate into Pirates. I'm talking like 15% win rate into Anijin. It's absolutely abysmal. I don't think Io Feel the Rush is a safe pick for the open rounds. What I would do for the open rounds would probably be like Karma Set SI. You know, really pick on the weak link in the Aphelios Victor. But again, if you do want to be more consistent into Jax Ornn, then I think Rise is worth taking a look at if you are of the same opinion as Taigai that, like, this deck does beat aggro. Because if you go like Plaza Guardian, Rise, Jax Ornn, that's a pretty safe bet for the open rounds. Although I think this lineup is also just doing pretty well into maybe not so much into Jax Ornn, but like it's fine into the standard lineup, right? Because like your Karma Set is beating the Aphelios Victor, your Rise is beating the Jax Ornn, but then you run into a bit of a complication of like potentially hitting a bad matchup, or not necessarily hitting a bad matchup, but like being a little bit awkward into something. So I think it might even end up being like Plaza Guardian, Karma Set SI, and Jax Ornn, and like not run Rise for the open rounds. But I still like Taigai, because like I talked with Taigai before the event. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this lineup, and I'm pretty confident that it could hold its own in the open rounds, but I think there are safer ways to go about it. But I think like some variation of this on top of the standard lineup is kind of what you want to be doing. You know, pick two between like the Rise, the Karma Set SI, and the Jax Ornn. I think Aphelios Victor's like fine, but it's still kind of the weak link of the lineup, and I think that there is a way that you can navigate that for the open rounds. But for Top Cut, if this is what we're looking at in Top Cut, I don't think you're getting Aphelios Victor to a level to beat this. I don't think that's really on the table. Conservatory, I would imagine, is also beating Jax Ornn, though. So like Conservatory, I think, could be a very safe pick for the open rounds if you want to go like Jax Ornn, Conservatory, Plaza Guardian. I don't think that's necessarily sort of a bad way to go about it, but I think that there are so many ways to go about it that I don't necessarily want to like hard sell you on a certain direction. So that's just kind of where I'm at right now, is like Conservatory. Take this one. Oops, not that one. Wrong button. Take Plaza Guardian, put it in your lineup. That's step fucking 1. Deck's just broken. I've been playing it a lot on ladders, so like I'm getting a much better feel for it, playing it in a bunch of different matchups, and every time it feels winnable. A very big fan of this deck. And then just pick 2 of these. Aphelios Victor is probably the one that I'm lowest on. And then for open rounds, I think Karma Set and Rise might actually be tied for me. And then it's probably like Conservatory if you want to get cheeky. And then like Jaxorn is just, again, like such a consistent deck is really the power of it. But I think that with it being so consistently the second most played deck in each region behind Plaza Guardian, and Plaza Guardian not being a counterable option, I think people are really going to have their sights set on beating Jax Ornn. So that does make me like a little bit more wary for it, even in the open rounds. But that's just like, that's kind of how I want you to be thinking about this weekend, is like Jax Ornn might have a little bit more of a target on its back. Aphelios Victor might be a little bit of the weak link, but I don't really expect to see a drastic upheaval of our most played lineup. I think that plenty of people are still going to get through with this lineup because, again, it's very skill expressive. It's very consistent. It's got healing. It's got late game. Like, it's a very decent lineup, and I think even if someone is coming in to counter pick one of your things, you know, can they really consistently blow up your Jax Ornn? Now, Jax Ornn, again, I'm not like super big on. I haven't played it myself. I've been playing against it a lot. Personally, every time I lose to it, it's off of like double Jax in the early game plus Ornn on 7, and that's like most of my losses to the deck. So I do believe that like that is something that you can be picking on. But again, you've kind of got your pick of the litter here. Again, like these are things that are beating Aphelios Victor, and these are things that are beating Jax Ornn, just so that you've got an idea of what you're looking at. Nora Swain, maybe that's the answer. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where like Nora decks can do very well into control because they swarm a little bit harder than you expect them to. Obviously, like something that comes up the board and then has Noxus removal is going to, at the very least, do like okay into aggro. Maybe not great, but at least okay. The problem, though, is that I think because we are seeing such burn-heavy versions of aggro, something like Conservatory could be a bit of a liability because some amount of unit damage is going to slip through at you. That's just a given. It's going to happen. There's really no avoiding it. If your opponent has token on 1 and they drop a Legion Rearguard, you're taking 3 damage or you're sacking an Annie. Neither of those is a particularly good feeling. And because things like Scion are on, you know, triple blowback, triple mystic shot, triple get excited, even something as minuscule as, even like I'm counting it up, and that's, you know, like 24 points of burn in the main deck, right? So I think that you do, like, if you want to feel favored into aggro, you do need to have some kind of healing, because the aggro decks have so much more burn than they ever have packed into them. So I think that like just matching them on board is not enough, as it was back in the days of like Draven Ezreal. Like Draven Ezreal did really well into aggro because it just like, you know, took very minimal unit damage in the early game and then like was able to counter the fervors and withstand the decimates. And that was all you had to do. Nowadays it is a little bit different with burn being so heavy. You do need some type of healing in your deck, and that is something I implore you to look at. With the exception sort of obviously being Plaza Guardian, and that is because one, Plaza Guardian can actually RNG into healing, but more importantly, Plaza Guardian will just kind of like kill you before you have the time to run out your 10 decimates and all your blowbacks and things like that. It will like really force you to expend your cards a little bit earlier on to try and push through that unit damage. But again, Plaza Guardian, like stats-wise, not doing very well into aggro, but the stats are, it's very low stats. Very low stats. Well, no, sorry. I'm thinking of a different deck. I think I was thinking of Rise or something. No, I was thinking of a different deck. Sorry. Never mind. Ignore the stats part. But again, like I don't think Plaza Guardian's necessarily pick-onable by aggro, or at least it's not consistent, right? Like even if you have like a 60% win rate into Plaza Guardian, that's not a tournament winning win rate, right? It's not a tournament topping win rate either. But obviously, like a lot of people in the Americas got in on aggro last time, and like obviously Plaza Guardian was there, you know. Didn't quite take half the top cut, but like a lot of people played Plaza Guardian through Swiss. So again, just to reiterate, I think aggro is a bit of a bait, but if people try to big brain it too hard, then suddenly aggro is not a bait, but I'm not going to be able to tell you whether that is what is happening or not. It's really just going to come down to how everyone plays it on the day. And then for a recommended lineup, I already kind of talked about that. So yeah, I hope that helps. Again, this sheet will be in the description below. And hopefully, if my words have not reached you, you can take a look at this and, you know, kind of figure it out for yourself. I'm going to leave up the Tournament Tactician tab on this as well. And I will have stats for this weekend's Eternal Open as well. And then next week, I'll come back and we can kind of talk about that. So, thank you so much for watching. I have been Boulevard. As always, good luck in your tournaments.